Hello and welcome to episode 239 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. Hello and welcome to episode 241 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where I'm going to cover trust and visible teamwork in online collaboration. So I'll think through with you, what do we mean when we talk of building trust? Do we need trust in remote teams or can we be effective without it? And my own little question at the moment, which is, can visible teamwork practices affect trust negatively? I am working a lot around visible teamwork at the moment, looking at the different foundations we need to lay down in teams before implementing those practices. And so I'm thinking about it a lot, and I thought I'd share some thinking with you. 2 episodes ago, I looked at the link with task interdependence. So if you're looking at ways of structuring your online communication, then check that out. I think it's very I found it very interesting. And hello to listener Chris Caladonato, who mentioned that actually it gave her some food for thought too. So hello, Chris. And listeners always say hello on social media or wherever. So before that, I will recap the principles of visible teamwork, which are a set of principles. And even before that, before I start my little solo show, well, if this is the first time you're listening to the show, welcome. My name is Pilar Orti. Lovely to meet you. I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant and host of this show. And this show, well, we have a mix of episode styles, so I hope that you enjoy all of them. You probably enjoy some more than others. We have these solo shows, which are quite practical based. We're looking at the practice of online collaboration. Then we have once a month the shows with Maya Middlemits with the What's Going On, which are all about what is being said about the future of work and in particular remote work at the moment. And then the ones with guests. And the ones with guests, well, with them we really want to go beyond the working from home conversation because, of course, this show has been around for 5 years, which is not a long time, but still, we've always advocated for using remote work to make the world of work a better place in all sorts of ways. So we cannot now stick to the working from home conversation. We've got to continue to see beyond that. The last episode was all about remote work with and how we can use it for socioeconomic change. So so if you're into that, I recommend that one very highly. Check out some of our recent episodes. And if you're not listening to this from our website has loads of stuff, virtualnotdistant.com. The resources section has lots of blog posts, all the show notes to these episodes, and of course, a list of our services, how we work with organizations. And if you're listening to the show from the website, then don't forget to subscribe through a podcast app like Spotify, like Apple Podcasts, like wherever you listen to your podcasts. One last plug, and we'll get into it. You can sign up to our monthly newsletter, which has reading and writing recommendations, as well as a digest of our own content. And that you can sign up there at virtualnotdistant.com/newsletter. So today's topic, well, it came about because I gave a talk for the Distributed Teams Conference last week, and I am still writing the book of Visible Teamwork, which is really about mixing asynchronous practices with synchronous communication in remote teams, because to make remote work sustainable with others, we cannot rely on real-time communication because it will be exhausting. So we need asynchronous practices which allow us to work a little bit more flexibly. And so I talked about that in the conference. If you're a regular listener, then check out the conference. It was over 3 days, about 4 talks per day. And on day 3, you can listen to Laurel Farr and Mark Kilby, who've been regular guests on the show. And you can find my own talk on day 1, an hour into the conference. And what I'm really looking at here is how visible teamwork practices can help to build trust, not just in real time, but also asynchronously, and whether they risk eroding that trust if it's there. And I love the word eroding. I find it really visual even, and very earthy, because trust is built little by little, mainly, and it disappears little by little, unless it's whether there's one big thing that happens and then the trust goes whoosh. So the main thing that I'm suggesting is that building and sustaining trust does not have to take place in real time, and that there are non-real time practices that can help with that. So I now need to go into visible teamwork, which is a set of principles. I'll go over it quite quickly because if you're a regular listener, you will have heard of it. And they are deliberate communication, which is about extracting the personal information that we would probably get if we saw each other in an office every day, and making that visible. So I'm looking at things like context, so what's happening around us, our mood, maybe our availability to be there for others rather than to just be doing our own work. So that's first set, deliberate communication. We then have work visibility, which is not just about making the work visible, but making the workflow visible, making our thinking around the work visible, maybe even making some learning visible, and making conversations we have with people outside our team visible. That's the huge one. And then another small one is planned spontaneity. I say small one in the fact that I don't have much to say about it, but it can be huge. And we do have an episode all about planned spontaneity. And I don't think I've got it handy. Oh, yeah. Oh, look at that. Episode 211, which was published on the 24th of October 2019, called Planned Spontaneity. So if you're into that, have a listen. Okay, so now I've lost my place in the Trello card. Oh, yeah. So visible teamwork is those three things: deliberate communication, work visibility, planned spontaneity. Now, let's step into trust. And before we look at how trust is built, we need to understand how likely we are as individuals to trust others. Now, especially if you're in a management position, and you've started to work remotely, or you've had to start to work remotely, you probably have heard a lot that you just have to trust people to get on with the work, even though you can't see them. For some people, that will cause a real stress because they might have what is called a low propensity to trust, which is just a natural inclination to think that someone's going to act in our best interest, that they're doing what they say they're doing, etc. And that's part of our personalities. So it will be a little bit genetic, a little bit influenced by our past experiences. And you need to know and be very, very honest with yourself is how easily can you trust people without having a lot of information? And propensity to trust in virtual teams, especially in project teams, it really affects how the team works together. You can see that if no one is really trusting each other, if everyone's just worried about, saving their own back, guarding their backs, if we're not really reaching out when we need help because we don't trust that people will think we're okay, etc., that can be very damaging in an online space. So we need to know that we, and someone asked during the conference, actually someone, I think it was Mark Kilby, very difficult question, which was, so how do you have that conversation with people about how likely you are to trust others, especially as a manager? If you have difficulty just trusting people, get on with the work, how do you explain to someone that you need information from them to be able to trust them? And the answer, well, it's out there. Of course, it all depends on context and your relationship. But I think it's a conversation that we can have, especially if we're a new team, or if we've been thrown into remote, or if we're making that transition. Is how much information do we need to just feel safe? There's a lot of overlap, trust, and psychological safety also. So some of the information that we might need to to trust other people in the context of work? Well, I'll refer to Charles H. Green from the trust equation, who put together the trust equation. And he says that it's the trust is directly correlated to how reliable you think someone is. So does someone do what they said they were going to do? Or do they communicate when they said they were going to do something and they're not going to do it because they can't do it or whatever? And this is really important, is when we say we're going to do something, if we can't do it, then let's tell other people, because that might be not flagging that there's a problem is often more of a cause for losing trust in someone than flagging there's a problem, than the problem itself. And for this reliability also, I think that some of the concepts under deliberate communication in visible teamwork are important, like have we got a system for communicating context? Like what is happening in our lives that our team members or a manager can't see that might affect how we show up, which might affect how reliable we are. We don't have to wait for meetings to do this. This can be done in an asynchronous manner, whether we're using Slack, which, yes, can be used as an asynchronous tool. We don't have to use it in exactly the way it was intended to be used, or even email, which, again, is an asynchronous tool. So it can be something that we do once a week, once a day, however much information our team members need from us. So that reliability, integrity, which are about do we basically do our actions match our words? Do we say we have certain values and do we live by them? And again, all of this is stuff that will get lost if we don't communicate it deliberately, if we don't make that thinking visible in some way. So that can be done through open conversations, for example, where we might have had a conversation with a client or with someone in another team. And maybe it's important because not just the information that the conversation has, but actually about our actions, about why we approached a conversation in a certain manner, why we made a certain decision. All of that information sometimes gets lost, and we want to bring it to a team, but we maybe don't want to give it so much weight that we need to tell the team members during a meeting, because we have lots of other stuff to talk about that. So we might capture it again in a Google Doc, if it's long form, in a Slack, or even an email. However, but we can continue to build this trust by opening up some of the conversations we're having in an asynchronous way. And then, so we've got reliability, integrity, transparency. So how much do you make your intentions and thinking process available to others? This builds on what I was just saying also. This is something that gets lost, is some of our thinking processes. For some teams, this might not be as important, but for others actually might be worth once a week or every 2 weeks to share either a long form text document or an audio piece. This would be something that might be quite interesting because audio is not as easily searchable, but it's also quite personal. And we might not need to be having a record or documenting something we've done, but we might want to share it with our team. So again, have different systems. I think I've said this for ages. If you're listening to this regularly, sorry for me repeating myself, but asynchronous audio has a lot of potential. And this is something where this is as a trust building tool also. And finally, so we had reliability, integrity, transparency, and we've got competence, which is, and this is not from Green's model, but something it's come from other places. And this is important when we're looking at relationships at work. Competence. Can people trust you to do a good job? Or can they trust you to reach out when you need help? That's part of being competent also. So we need to understand the building blocks of trust to then start talking about trust. One more piece of theory before we get onto the remote landscape and visible teamwork specifically, and it's the ways in which we develop trust and the kind of trust that we need. And it's we're going to look at cognitive versus affective trust. And cognitive trust is about building trust in a way that appeals to the head. So maybe I see you be efficient at work. I really rate you as a professional. It's something that is a bit more heady. Whereas affective trust is more about knowing you as a person, understanding you, maybe connecting more on an intimate manner. And I don't know. It's more around the social aspect. And cognitive thinking, affective, affection. And geographically, different cultures need different kinds of interactions to build trust. So those that need more of an affective trust then will need to be doing lots of social gatherings, spending lots of time together to understand you, to get to know you, lots of lunches. Whereas cognitive might need to get into the work a lot faster to build that trust. Chances are that different people in your team will be hanging on to these different kinds of trust. How the importance that we give to each, probably subconsciously, might vary over time. I don't know. So it's worth looking at that, because when we look at building trust, we often go straight to affective. Straight at having a virtual coffee together or doing something that's fun or blah, blah, blah. And I might not need that. In fact, personally speaking, I need more of the cognitive thing. I need to get working with you to understand how you work, and then I can see how much I trust you. Then the personal stuff, yes, it does help. It's not as important. So for other people, it will be different, but chances are that in your team, you'll have some sort of mixture. I won't say balance. And we probably want to build a bit of both. So visible teamwork can help with both, actually. So why is trust important in a team, and what are the behaviors that we need to prevent? And what are some of the scenarios that are going to damage those relationships? Well, trust does affect a team's effectiveness. And also, well, for example, chasing up after people to make sure the work is being done because we don't trust they'll meet a deadline. That shows distrust, and that can affect someone's performance and someone's engagement and commitment to the work and the team. Not giving team members challenging pieces of work because we don't trust they'll do them well. Another behavior that might show a lack of trust is designing an individual's workflow and task process for them because we don't trust that they know how to carry out the work. So these are management behaviors that signal that we don't trust a team member's abilities. I'm not going to go into how we can manage or solve these behaviors right now because they all have to do with management styles. And actually, for example, sometimes we might have a good reason for not trusting someone, but we want the solving of it not to be completely remedial, like doing something for them that they should be doing themselves, but how can we coach them and help them to get more competent so that we can trust them a bit more? So that's one side of the conversation I'm not going to go into right now. From a team member's point of view, when we don't trust our manager and other team members to act in our best interest, then we don't flag when we're struggling with a task, we don't innovate, we don't ask for help for fear of being ridiculed, and we don't make ourselves available to our team members beyond what's required from our role. And also sometimes if we feel like we're not trusted, then we might revert to behaviors that actually just show that we can be trusted rather than get on with the work. So, so all of that. And in remote teams, so remember what I was talking about right at the beginning, unless we have ongoing systems of communication, because trust gets built on information, we rely on team members having a high propensity to trust. That is, someone's tendency to trust others even before that trust has been earned. And we've seen that that's uneven. We can't rely on that. And I'm suggesting that visible teamwork practices can help to build that trust. And they don't need to be in real time. So, for example, when team members make their work visible, either by working in the cloud or by sharing it every now and then, you can take pictures. If the work can be pictured, you can share that. Or making the workflow visible, which can be as simple as I'm working on this week, this is in progress, this is done. then the manager and other team members, they no longer have to trust that people are doing the work. They can see that the work is being done. And we can, instead of checking up on someone, we can go and check a collaboration platform. We can check a Kanban board. We can check the project management tool. That's what we check. And no one needs to know. Some people are probably cringing as you're listening to this, but no one needs to know that we're checking up on someone. And that might be fine, because we need to do that. And it's our issue, not theirs. They haven't shown maybe that they are not trustworthy, but we might just still need to do that. And isn't it great that they never know we were checking up on them? And also, even more beautiful is that this information is not there for the manager, it's there for the team. And again, what information needs to be shared about all this will depend completely on the nature of the team and the task interdependence. See episode 2 weeks ago. But the information is there, and it's there to help us do our work, and it's helping us to remove a little bit of that need to trust. So, yeah. And in a study carried out in 2016, which is neatly summarized by Science for Work in a blog post from, I think it was last year or 2 years ago now. So in that study, it involved almost 2,000 teams, so that's quite a bit. The researchers found, and I'm going to quote, that the level of trust has less of an impact on the effectiveness of the team, of a virtual team, when team members have access to a record of their interactions. So it's going to affect the effectiveness of the team less if we can see, and if we have a record, if we have documentation. These interactions can be the visible workflow or open conversations, and they're just there to make sure, well, they're not just there to make sure, sorry, that's the wrong phrase, but if we have that, then whether we trust each other or not affects our work less. So that's one thing to bear in mind. So what I'm advocating for is very deliberate communication. We don't need to do lots of it, and you need to pick what is good for your team, because the other day I was talking to someone and saying, yeah, our work is not to be on collaboration platforms all day. It's not to know how to use them wonderfully. We've got other things to get on with, but these just need to help our teamwork. So my concern right now is that can adopting some of these visible teamwork practices, however thoughtfully, can they decrease trust in a team? So that's my big question. So for example, if you are introducing a process of visible workflow where you've all agreed that at the end of each day, you'll update your task progress on a Kanban board, a Trello board, for example, which I love. However, if I'm going through a really busy period, I'm just getting on with the work, and at the end of the day, I just forget to update that card. And I forget again. And I'm doing the work, but no one can see I'm doing it because I'm just getting on with it. And then that might come across to signal that I'm not doing the work, or that I don't care enough about the team to report it. So again, we've got to make sure that anything we introduce is not going to damage the relationships in the team. For example, also, if we haven't agreed which tool we'll use for what kind of communication, our messages might go unreplied to. And again, if we think about information about reliability that we're gathering from people to see whether we trust them or whether we are trusted, then that is a problem. So you need to agree in your team what platform you're using for what. You need to set your notification settings in a way that works for you. So if you don't want notifications, turn them off, but make sure you periodically check those platforms. Or if you can't check the platforms regularly, make sure your notifications are on for when people need you. It's a bit more complex than that, but that's kind of the gist. And also bear in mind that when we first introduce some communication processes, there's just going to be different levels of adoption as people find out how to make them work for them as individuals. And I'm going to give you another layer of our relationship with trust in our virtual teams, in a remote setup. And it's the trust in technology. So the reason why I might not be using that collaboration platform often might have nothing to do with my trust in team members or my engagement with my team or my work. It might have to do with the fact that I don't trust them. It never works. Sometimes the messages are not saved, or I just haven't learned how to use it properly. So I don't trust it. I don't trust myself. So it is, I'm going to say it's complicated. Of course, it's complicated. We're talking about human interactions. But I think these are all things we need to be aware of. So if you haven't introduced any of these new communication practices, then this is the perfect opportunity for you and your team members to discuss your current work practices with a view to implementing something different. These conversations can really help with team building because team members need to share what helps them do their best work, what might get in the way, what information they require from other team members, and when is the last time you had one of those conversations? Maybe now is a good time. Hopefully it is. Hopefully this is timely. And of course, we can help you at Virtual Not Distant, but you can probably also do it yourselves. So I'm going to wrap it up now. Just remember that, okay, there's different kinds of trust: affective trust, cognitive trust. We look for reliability, integrity, transparency, and competence. So we look for information that helps us build that. And also don't forget that propensity to trust. That's a very personal thing. So virtualnotdistant.com for any comments. Have a look at our services there. We do training around visible teamwork. I can also facilitate a conversation in the team to draw up a team agreement or to discuss some of these issues, some of the things I've been talking about, and to design some processes with you. Remember, the visible teamwork is a set of principles, and you can adapt that and adopt and adapt in a way that suits you and your ecosystem, your own technology. And finally, we're soonish launching our podcasting for Connection, which is in-house podcasting to help building that sense of belonging asynchronously through a podcast. We'd love to talk to you about that. Pilar@virtualnotdistant.com. That's my email address, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com. If you have anything to add about what I talked in the show that you would like to share with other listeners, I would love to hear from you. And connect on social media with me at Pilar Orti or on LinkedIn. But if you reach out through LinkedIn, then let me know that you want to connect because you're listening to the show. I think that's it. That's it for now. I'll leave you with a stock outro, but not before I say thank you for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.